She sang to an empty cradle after losing her baby, until a human walked in holding her daughter. Mist slid between the glass bridges of Cerealia, nine like low steam leaking from vents, drifting in slow curls before the wind tore it apart. The ocean beneath the city glimmered dull silver, waves breaking against the stilts that held the lower decks above water. Cash and Cade climbed the last bridge with one hand tied on the railing, the other cradling a thermal shawl wrapped around a child no bigger than his forearm. His shoulders ached from a climb. His jaw had been locked since the moment he found her. The shawl smelled faintly of sweet nursery soap, salt air, and old sweat. He could feel heat bleeding from her body into his chest in faint pulses. Her skin was coral pale and dry, the soft tissue under her eyes tinged gray from dehydration. Every dozen steps, he glanced down to check her breathing. Still shallow, still rhythmic. He moved faster. Cashin wasn't a rescuer by trade. He worked for the Transit Authority, assigned to the Recovery and Manifest Division, an archivist who tracked lost cargo skimmers through the fog belts that circled the city. But 3 cycles ago, a nursery pod on the upper terraces filed a missing in-transit claim. Infant lost during environmental transfer. Officially, the colony declared her dissolved. Cashin hadn't accepted that. He had spent 14 nights cross-matching old drift logs, tracking damaged registry beacons through static bursts, until he found a derelict skimmer crushed in the fog stacks. The cradle inside was sealed, the temperature barely survivable. She had been there, alive. He had no orders to bring her home. He did it anyway. The bridge narrowed near the nursery pod. Its walls glowed faintly in steady pulses, white light dimming and rising again like the rhythm of lungs. Cashin slowed his pace, forcing his steps to even out. He needed to look calm. Panic would only make what came next worse. The door hissed open on his handprint. Warm, damp air hit him. He stepped inside. The pod was quiet. Too quiet. Toys sat lined on a shelf, untouched. Floor cushions were pressed flat from disuse. The cradle in the center was empty. The heat filaments along the walls flickered weakly, their amber glow unstable. The air carried a slight chill. She sat on the floor in front of the cradle. Long black hair hung tangled over her shoulders, reaching her hips. Her skin was soft coral pink, dotted with faint freckles that pulsed with her heartbeat. A mist-damp ceremonial shawl clung to her ribs and hung from one shoulder. Her lips moved in a slow, low melody, wordless, rising and falling by small steps. Her hands rested on her knees, but trembled. She didn't look up. Cashin stood still for 3 breaths. He squared his shoulders, straightened his back. Then he spoke. Arya Zell. The lullaby stopped. Her head lifted. Her eyes were bloodshot, their irises dark amber, and fixed on the bundle in his arms. Who are you? She said. Flat, empty of trust. Cash and Cade. Transit Authority. Recovery Division, he said. His voice stayed low, firm, controlled. I found her. Arya didn't move at first. Her jaw shifted once, like she had forgotten how to speak. Then she pushed up from the floor. Her knees shook under her weight. She stumbled 1 step forward. Cashin lowered to one knee and unwrapped the shawl. The girl stirred weakly, a faint rasp leaving her throat. Arya reached with both hands and took her. Her grip was unsure at first, then locked. She pressed her face into the child's neck. Her shoulders jerked with a sound half-breathed, half-crushed into silence. Cashin stayed kneeling. He forced his hands to unclench and rest on his thighs. He let her have the time she needed. She's dehydrated, he said quietly. Cold, but stable. No trauma signs. I gave her 2 drops of water on the way up. Arya didn't answer. She rocked the girl gently, murmuring words too soft to catch. The child's tiny fingers clutched at her braid and held on. Arya let out a sharp breath that cracked halfway through and steadied again. How long? She asked finally, eyes still on the girl. 3 cycles, he said. She was in a wrecked skimmer down in the fog belt. Sealed cradle. The heat lattice had failed. The shawl kept her warm enough to survive. Arya shut her eyes. Cashin saw the muscles tighten in her jaw. She opened them again, slower, and stepped back toward the cradle. She sat cross-legged on the floor with the child curled to her chest. Her voice came rough. "You should have taken her to Med Bay." "I considered it," he said. "They would have logged her as unidentified. The inquiry would take days. You were 30 minutes away." "You'll be fine," she said. "I know. Why risk it?" "She's your daughter," he said. "You needed to see her first." Arya's breathing changed. Not calmer, more focused. She shifted Sori to one arm and touched the girl's cheek with her thumb, then spoke again. "What happens now?" "She needs warmth and hydration," Cashin said. "Then food, then sleep. I'll stabilize the pod and stay here until she's strong enough for medbay check-in." "You can't stay," Arya said. Not defiant, defensive. "I'll stay by the door," he said, already scanning the room. The heat filaments along the walls were cracked. The mist filters above the cradle showed yellow warning lights. He unlatched his pack. "Your heat lattice is failing. I'll repair it." Arya watched him like she was seeing him clearly for the first time. "You're not a medic." "No," Cashin said. "I recover what's lost." Her brow furrowed. She held him in a long stare, as if weighing whether to throw him out or collapse. Then she nodded once. Cashin set up the portable heat coil by the basin, filled a small cup with warm Orvan water, and knelt beside her. He touched a drop to the child's lips. The girl stirred, licked, swallowed. He waited 10 seconds and gave another. Arya's hands trembled less with each breath. "Name?" he asked. "Sori," Arya said, her voice breaking slightly. Cashin logged it silently in his head and checked the girl's pulse at her ankle. Weak but present. He exhaled and stood. He moved to the wall panel, opened it, and started resealing the cracked filament. Arya's eyes stayed locked on him the entire time. He worked fast, precise. The heat came back up in slow degrees. Arya adjusted the shawl around Sori and whispered something Cashin didn't catch. He heard the tone, reassurance. Habit. When the lattice reached stable warmth, he closed the panel and straightened. He caught Arya's gaze. Her eyes were clearer, sharper. "You can go now," she said, testing him. "I'm not going anywhere," Cashin said. "If someone tries to take her, they'll go through me first." Something flickered behind her expression. Conflict, then release. She nodded, short and tense. "There's a floor mat in the closet." Cashin unrolled it by the door, boots off, belt coiled at arm's reach. He sat, spine straight, hands resting on his knees. He let the silence settle. He watched the rise and fall of Sori's chest. Arya placed the girl in the cradle, one hand on her small chest until the breath steadied. Then she sat beside it, her shoulders curved protectively around the space. She didn't thank him. She didn't have to. Cashin stayed awake long after their breathing synced, eyes on the door, mind already planning what to fix next. He hadn't been sent here to save anyone. But he was here now, and he wasn't leaving. Rain beat against the outer dome through the night, a soft, relentless drumming that blurred the horizon beyond the glass. Cashin stayed half awake on the mat by the door, lying still but with his mind running through checklists. Heat lattice, repaired but needs monitoring. Mist filters, too close to failure. Food stores, unknown, probably low. He tracked Sori's breathing by sound. Each small, even inhale meant he could hold off the next action for another minute. He dozed only after her breaths aligned with Arya's. He woke to silence broken by a faint rustle. Pale light seeped through the pod's ceiling vents. Arya was kneeling by the cradle, her hair loose and falling like black cloth around her face. She had dark shadows under her eyes, and her movements were sharp, too fast, like her body was running on leftover panic. Sori stirred in her arms. The child's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. "Still warm," Arya whispered, mostly to herself. Her voice had a raw edge, as if it hadn't carried normal speech in days. Cashin sat up quietly, boots still off. "Good. She needs water before food." Arya turned, startled. She'd forgotten he was there. Her eyes flashed with something defensive, then dropped as she realized how close she'd held the child through the night. "You really stayed?" she said. Not disbelief, just stating it like a fact she still didn't know how to file in her mind. "I said I would," Cashin answered. His tone was calm, but not soft. He stood, rolled his mat, and crossed to the basin. The floor was cold against his feet, a thin layer of condensation slick on the tile. How long has it been since you ate? Arya blinked like the question came from nowhere. I don't know. Then it's been too long, he said, setting his pack on the counter. He took out a sealed pouch of Varan root concentrate and a coil heater, clipped it to the basin, and filled a shallow pot with Orvan water from the tap. He checked its clarity out of habit. It ran clean. Good. While the coil warmed, he glanced at her. She hadn't moved, just swayed slightly where she knelt, eyes fixed on the child. Cashin noticed her collarbones showing sharply under the damp shawl. He filed it away, not pity, just logistics. She was half-starved. He needed her stable if Sori was going to stay that way. Where have you been sleeping? He asked. Here, she said. In this pod? Alone? Yes. The answer was clipped, but something flickered behind it. Cashin could hear the silence that followed, thick and defensive. The colony's records had said nothing about her life outside this nursery pod. He guessed why now. No partner, no family close enough to intervene. When the child disappeared, the world had just stepped back and marked the case closed. The pot began to steam. Cashin stirred the concentrate into the water until the root dissolved into a dull orange broth. The smell filled the room, earthy, faintly bitter. He poured half into a shallow bowl and set it on the floor mat near her. Eat first, he said. Your hands are shaking. I'll feed her, she said automatically. You'll feed her better if you can stand, he replied. His tone left no opening. Arya hesitated, then adjusted Sori and took the bowl. Her fingers trembled on the spoon at first, then steadied. Cashin poured the rest of the broth into a smaller dish and left it to cool before preparing the child's portion. While she ate, he scanned the pod systems again. The mist filters still flashed orange. He climbed the wall panel, replaced both cartridges, and checked the airflow. Clean mist hissed out in a fine vapor, raising the humidity by 2%. Arya's skin began to glow faintly at her freckles again. Bioluminescent stabilization. Good sign. Where did you find her? Arya asked suddenly, voice low. Cashin stayed crouched on the panel frame. Derelict skimmer. Cargo cradle wedged in the drift stacks, about 40 levels down. Heat seal failed. Someone had wrapped her in your shawl and sealed the hatch from the outside. Arya's spoon paused midair. Outside? You mean someone left her there? He met her eyes. Not an accident. She stared at him for several seconds, not breathing. He saw her pupils tighten, her jaw go rigid. Then she blinked once, sharp, and looked down at Sori. She didn't speak. She held the child closer and finished her broth in silence. Cashin finished the repairs and climbed down. He washed his hands, then knelt and dipped the tip of his finger in the cooled child portion, touching it to Sori's lips. The girl stirred, licked, swallowed. He waited 10 seconds and did it again. Arya's gaze tracked every motion. She looked like she wanted to intervene, but forced herself still. She'll need more, but slow, Cashin said quietly. Digestive shock is possible. I know how to feed my own child, Arya said, but her voice wasn't sharp. It was weary, defensive, wrapped around relief. I know you do, he said simply, and handed her the dish. She fed Sori with hands steadier than before. The girl swallowed 3 tiny spoonfuls before falling back into sleep. Arya exhaled and leaned her head against the cradle's edge, eyes closed. Cashin stood and rinsed the dishes. He moved with mechanical calm, but inside his mind wouldn't stop running. Someone had sealed that cradle from the outside. That meant intention. It meant someone had either wanted to hide her or make her disappear. He didn't know which yet. It didn't matter. Either way, Arya couldn't know now. Not until Sori was stronger. She wouldn't survive the hit. Arya spoke without looking up. You're not like the others. Cashin paused, drying his hands. Others. They came when she vanished. They filled out forms. Talked to me like I wasn't here. Her eyes opened. They were clearer now, less red but hollow. Then they left. I'm not here for forms, he said. Then what are you here for? He didn't answer right away. He looked at Sori, tiny chest rising and falling under the soft glow of the cradle lights. Then, at Arya, hair damp, shoulders slumped from exhaustion. still keeping herself upright out of sheer refusal to collapse. "I'm here because someone needed to walk her back," he said. That stopped her. Her mouth parted, then closed again. She looked at him like she was trying to decide if he was serious or just broken in a way that matched her own. After a moment, she nodded once. No smile, no softening, just acknowledgement. Cashin checked the temperature readout on the wall. Stable. He took his datapad and began listing what the pod lacked. Pantry empty, medkit expired, cradle cushion worn through. He'd get replacement from the mist markets. He'd take the upper terrace's access route. He'd be back before the system flagged the visit as unauthorized. "I'm leaving for supplies," he said. "I'll lock the door. Don't open it unless it's me." Arya looked up sharply. "You're coming back?" "Yes." "You sound sure." "I am." She studied him for a long moment, then gave a small nod and turned her focus back to Sori. Cashin palmed the door and stepped into the mist again, already mapping every stall and vendor in his head. He would get food, heat packs, new cradle mesh. He would build this place back up from nothing if he had to, because now it wasn't just about recovery work. Now it was about keeping them alive. Cashin returned through the mist markets 2 hours later, his boots slick with condensation and his pack heavy with supplies. The lower terraces buzzed with their usual subdued chaos. Vendors calling prices, drones gliding overhead on fixed routes, steam rising from street vents. He ignored all of it, moving with the quiet focus that had followed him since his survey years. His mind stayed on the pod, on Sori's shallow breaths, on Arya's face when she first saw her child again, shock draining into something close to fear. The door recognized his palm and unlocked with a click. Warm air rolled out to meet him. The pod smelled faintly of damp fabric and Varen broth. Arya was curled on the floor mat with Sori pressed to her chest, both wrapped in the repaired thermal shawl. They were asleep. Arya's arm tightened reflexively when the door shut behind him. She woke fast, eyes opening, body stiffening in an instant. "It's me," Cashin said, voice low. Her eyes tracked him, then dropped to the pack. "You came back. I said I would." He set the pack down and crouched to unseal it. Her expression shifted, relief so brief it almost looked like irritation. She adjusted Sori carefully into the cradle before standing. She swayed slightly, catching the edge of the table to steady herself. Cashin noticed. He also noticed how her hand stayed close to the cradle even as she moved away from it, like her body refused to break the distance completely. "What did you get?" she asked, trying for neutral tone. "Food, medical cloth, heat packs, new cradle mesh." He began placing items on the counter in a clean line. "Your filters are replaced. The air's stable now." Arya hovered by the table, watching him work with a kind of wary curiosity. She finally said, "Why are you doing all this?" "Because she's alive," Cashin said simply. "That's not an answer," she said. "It's the only one that matters." He met her eyes. "If I hadn't found her, she would have been written off as dissolved cargo." "You know that?" Her jaw tightened. "They already wrote her off." "Yes," he said. "That's why I didn't listen." Arya's face flickered between anger and something softer, but she turned away before it could settle. She began folding the thin blankets scattered on the floor. Cashin unpacked a small child feeder, sterilized it with boiled water, and prepped a batch of thin Varen root formula. While he worked, he decided to ask what had been pressing at the back of his mind since he found child. "Who else knew she was on that transport run?" he asked. Arya froze. Her back stayed to him, but her hands stilled on the fabric. "Just me," she said slowly, "and the courier who picked her up." "Why?" Cashin kept his tone level. Her cradle was sealed from the outside. It wasn't an accident. She turned fast. Her hair swung damp across her face. "You think someone? I don't know yet." He cut in, calm but firm. "And I'm not telling anyone until I do. I need the full manifest log from your transport hub." "They purged it after the declaration," Arya said. Her voice wavered. Anger or fear, he couldn't tell. "They always do after a death notice." Cashin cursed under his breath. Not loud, just enough for her to hear. She blinked at that, at the honesty of it. "I can still recover fragments," he said. "I've done it before, but it'll take time." Arya hesitated, then nodded. Then do it. He set the feeder on the counter. First we keep her alive. Then we find who did it. For a long moment, Arya didn't answer. Then she walked to the basin and began washing her hands, methodical and quiet. When she spoke, her tone had steadied. Tell me what you need from me. Stability, he said. Sleep. Food. If you collapse, she goes back to medbay, and this ends. She glanced over her shoulder at him, eyes narrowed, but not hostile. You give orders like you've done this before. I've kept people alive before, he said. Not children, but close enough. Soldier. Scout, he corrected. Long time ago. She studied him for a second longer, then nodded once and said nothing else. They worked without speaking for a while. Cashin replaced the cradle mesh with quiet efficiency while Arya reheated broth on the stove arm. Sori stirred awake halfway through, small and blinking. Arya lifted her and pressed her against her shoulder. Cashin watched the way the girl's tiny hand clutched the edge of Arya's shawl. He forced himself to look away and keep working. When the new mesh was secured, he washed his hands and stood beside Arya. She held the feeder awkwardly. Her hands were steady now, but tense. Small sips, he said. Stop if she turns her head. I know how to feed her, Arya said again, but this time it came with the ghost of a smile. Faint, almost unwilling. He nodded. Then do it. She fed Sori in slow, careful motions. The girl swallowed, blinked, and latched again. Cashin stood beside them with his arms folded, watching for the subtle signs. Color returning to the child's lips, her breathing settling. When she finished, Arya set the feeder down and let out a shaky breath like she'd been holding it since he left. She's stronger, Cashin said. I can feel her heartbeat again, Arya whispered, barely audible. The room went still after that. Steam curled from the cooling pot. Outside, the rain had stopped. Light from the dome spread across the floor in a pale stripe. Arya shifted Sori back into the cradle and stood watching her. She'll sleep now, Cashin said. You should too. Arya shook her head. Not yet. He didn't argue. He knew the look in her eyes, the refusal to close them in case the world took something else while they were shut. He'd worn that look once. It had taken years to stop. Instead, he said, I'll watch. Her eyes flicked to him, surprised. Then slowly she nodded. She sank onto the floor mat, pulling the repaired thermal shirt from the hook and wrapping it loosely around herself. Within minutes, her head dipped forward. She didn't fight it this time. Cashin stayed standing, silent and steady near the door. He watched both of them breathe until the tension in his chest eased just slightly. The pod was warmer now. Not safe, not yet, but warmer. He didn't know how long he would have to stay, but he knew he would. Cashin stood by the door through the entire sleep cycle, arms folded, back straight. He didn't move, didn't sit, didn't let himself sink into the comfort that the pod's new warmth offered. He had done this before. Guard duty during long-range survey missions, where you stared at bulkhead walls for hours while the crew slept behind you. You didn't move because if you moved, they knew you weren't fully watching. And right now, they needed to believe someone was. Sori's breaths were soft, and even now, the faint whistle gone. Her fingers flexed occasionally against the new mesh cradle lining. Arya slept on her side, wrapped loosely in his spare thermal shirt, the fabric draped open at the front, collar slipping low across her shoulder. Her face was calmer now, though faint stress lines cut deep between her brows. She slept like someone who didn't trust it would last. Cashin scanned the pod systems on his datapad again. Heat lattice stable. Filters holding. Humidity optimal. Nutrient stores minimal. Just enough for another day. He marked down what he'd need tomorrow. More Varan root. A small measure of Frolan seed powder for energy. Maybe soft grain paste if Sori's digestion kept improving. He made quiet calculations because keeping them alive meant nothing if he didn't plan 3 steps ahead. When Arya stirred, it was sudden. She sat up fast, breath sharp, eyes scanning the cradle before her mind caught up. Cashin watched her eyes focus on Sori, watched her shoulders drop when the girl stirred slightly in her sleep. Arya pressed her palm to her face, then blinked at him. You're still here, she murmured. Her voice was husky from sleep. I said I would be, he replied. Neutral, factual. She sat back, drawing her knees up. I thought maybe you'd slip out once I close my eyes. You think I leave things half-finished? He asked. I think people do, she said quietly, without accusation, just honesty. Cashin didn't answer that. He crossed the room and set a new heating pack into the food unit. The smell of reheated Varan broth spread fast, warm and sharp. Arya stayed on the mat, hugging her knees, watching him with a strange expression, less guarded but still alert. Like her mind hadn't decided what category he belonged in yet. You said you were a scout, she said finally. Why are you working manifest now? I got tired of losing people, he said simply, eyes on the pot. That sounds like something you say to end questions. It is, he admitted, then turned and met her eyes. But it's also true. She studied him, then nodded once. And yet you're here again. I said I was tired, Cashin said. Not done. Silence settled again, not hostile this time, just full. Arya stood slowly, stretched her arms with a wince, and crossed to the basin to wash her face. The water hissed faintly as it hit the ceramic. Her movements were sluggish but precise. Cashin saw the exhaustion in the way she gripped the basin edge a second too long. When she returned, Sori had woken. The child stared at the light vent with unfocused eyes, mouth opening in soft little noises. Arya lifted her immediately, checking the girl's temperature with her cheek, then cradled her close. Cashin handed her the warm feeder. Small sips again, he said. Same pace. Arya nodded, no resistance this time. She sat cross-legged by the cradle, feeding the girl in careful, measured motions. Cashin stayed crouched near the pod's controls, pretending to adjust settings while watching both of them from the corner of his vision. Halfway through, Arya asked, will they come? The authority, when they see she's alive? They might, Cashin admitted. But not yet. I didn't log the recovery. Her eyes snapped to him. That's illegal. Yes. Why? If I logged it, she would be taken to Med Bay, he said. They'd run a full genetic trace. If someone wanted her gone, that trace would tell them she's back. We don't want that yet. Arya froze with the feeder halfway to Sori's mouth. You think someone will try again? I think we can't rule it out, Cashin said steadily. So until she's strong enough to move and you're strong enough to protect her, this stays between us. Arya stared at him, breathing slow, expression unreadable. Then she nodded once. Then no one will know. Good, he said, and meant it. Sori finished the feed and gave a soft hiccup. Arya smiled faintly, quick, involuntary, and wiped the girl's chin with the edge of the shawl. She tucked her back into the cradle, fingers resting lightly on her chest until her breaths evened out again. She's heavier, Arya said softly. Already. That's good, Cashin said. It means she's fighting back. Arya sat back and exhaled. I'm not sure I remember how to live with her here. Cashin watched her for a long moment, then said, then start by staying upright and eating. The rest will follow. She gave a small laugh that sounded like it surprised her. You give orders like a commander. Old habit, he said. She hesitated, then asked, why did you really come for her, Cashin? No one else would have. He didn't look away, because she was still breathing, and everyone else decided that meant nothing. Arya's throat tightened. She lowered her gaze and brushed her fingers across Sori's small hand. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet. Then don't leave. Not yet. Cashin didn't smile, but he didn't look away either. I wasn't planning to. He rose and began clearing the empty bowls, efficient and silent. Arya watched him for a moment longer before leaning against the cradle's side. Her eyes followed him now, not like someone watching a threat, but like someone starting to believe he might actually stay. The pod was warmer than it had been in weeks. Not safe, not permanent, but for the first time, it felt like life might hold. Cashin returned from the basin with clean hands and a mind already moving 3 steps ahead. The pod was quiet except for the faint hum of the mist filters and the occasional soft breath from Sori. Arya sat cross-legged on the floor, one elbow on her knee, her fingers absent-mindedly brushing the cradle rail while her eyes followed the girl's chest rising and falling. Her body was still, but her mind wasn't. He could see it in the way her jaw tightened every few seconds, like she was silently rehearsing everything that could still go wrong. "We need to build a rotation," Cashin said. Arya blinked, as if pulled out of a loop of private panic. "A what?" "Shifts," he explained, kneeling to check the heat lattice readout. "You sleep, I watch. Then I sleep, you watch. Right now you're burning yourself out, just keeping your eyes open." "I'm fine," she said too fast. He glanced up at her, and she looked away almost immediately. "You're not," he said calmly. "Your coordination's slipping. You missed the cradle edge when you put her down earlier. You didn't notice." Her lips parted, defensive, then pressed tight. "If I stop, she might." "She won't," Cashin said, standing. "Because I'm here." Arya stayed silent, staring at Sori, then gave a single small nod. It was reluctant, but it was real. Cashin checked his datapad. "I'll take first watch tonight. But first, we need food. There's maybe half a portion of root left. I'll have to go back to the mist markets at dawn." "I can go," Arya said quickly. "No," he said flatly. "They know your face. If someone tampered with that transport, they'll know she lived if they see you. Right now, the fewer who know, the better." Her brow furrowed. "They wouldn't. They might," he cut in. His voice didn't rise, but stopped her cold. "I've seen people erase cargo that was worth less than her life." The color drained from her face, but she didn't argue again. Cashin took the empty feeder to clean it, and as the water hissed from the tap, he spoke without turning. "What happened the day she vanished? Walk me through it." Arya tensed, arms folding. "I already told them." "Tell me," he said, quiet but unyielding. She hesitated, then exhaled. "I put her in the transit cradle myself. Labeled her. Triple-checked the seal. She was being moved to the upper nursery dome for thermal conditioning. Routine. I watched them load her. The skimmer left on time. 2 hours later, they said it went dark in the fog belt. No distress beacon. No crash alarm. Nothing. Just gone." Her voice had gone flat by the last word, like she was reciting from someone else's life. Cashin turned off the tap and dried his hands. "Who signed for the pickup?" "I don't know," she admitted. "They sent a contracted courier. I never saw his face. Helmet on the whole time." The manifest number was wiped when they closed the case. Cashin's jaw tightened. That explained too much. Someone had planned the cradle's disappearance from the start, and the system had buried the evidence for them. "I'll recover the logs," he said. "They're never really erased." "You can do that. I've done it before." He met her eyes. "But not from here. I'll need access to a central terminal, quiet, unmonitored. That means leaving you for a few hours." Arya's arms tightened around herself. "No, it's the only way we find who did it," he said. "And if someone tries again, we need to know who we're watching for." Arya's throat worked, like she was fighting the logic even as she knew he was right. "She can't be alone." "She won't be," he said. "I'll block the pod's ID signature before I go. No one will know it's occupied. I'll lock the door from outside. You stay silent. No lights, no sounds, no door access unless it's my palm." Arya stared at him, breathing slow, shoulders tense. Finally she nodded, short and hard. "Then you come back." "I will," Cashin said, and he meant it. He glanced at the clock. 3 hours until dawn. He set his mat by the door and lay down, boots still on, belt coiled within reach. Arya sat where she was for a long moment, watching him like she still didn't quite believe any of this was real. Then she eased down beside the cradle, curling her legs under her. Sori stirred once, made a soft sound, then went still again. Cashin kept his eyes open until Arya's finally closed. He watched the rhythm of their breathing align, listened to the mist filters hum, and started planning the next step of their quiet war. Because he knew now this wasn't just about saving a child. It was about making sure no one ever tried to take her again. Cashin woke before the dome lights shifted from night mode to dawn. The pod was still dim, its air warm and dense with the faint smell of Varen broth and clean water. He rose without sound, every movement precise from years of habit, and scanned the pod systems. Heat lattice stable, filters green, humidity optimal, Sori's vitals steady. Good. Arya was curled on the floor beside the cradle, wrapped in the spare thermal shirt he'd given her, one bare shoulder peeking from the loose collar. Her face was slack with real sleep this time. The tension lines around her eyes softened. Cashin let her stay that way. She'd need her strength for what came next. He knelt by the cradle and checked Sori. The girl blinked up at him, unfocused but awake, her small hands twitching against the mesh lining. He tapped his finger gently against her palm. She latched weakly, then let go. Good grip response, stronger than yesterday. Cashin prepared a small portion of warmed Varen mix and fed her with slow, measured drops. She swallowed without coughing. When he finished, he wiped her chin with a clean cloth and tucked her back into the cradle's soft wrap. Arya stirred at the sound, her eyes snapping open. Her body tensed instantly until she saw Sori in the cradle and Cashin crouched beside her. Her shoulders dropped, her voice still gravelly with sleep. "She's okay. She's stable," Cashin said. Took a full portion. Arya pushed herself upright, brushing hair out of her face. "You did the feeding?" She woke hungry. "I didn't wait." Her eyes softened briefly, then sharpened again. "What time is it?" "Early," he said. "I'll go before the markets fill." Her head lifted fast. "So soon. If I move before the day shift, no one notices me," he said. "And the fewer who notice me, the fewer will wonder why I'm buying supplies for a child that's supposed to be dead." That hit her like a physical thing. He saw her jaw tighten, her arms fold. "Say it less directly," she muttered. "Truth doesn't get softer when you hide it," he said, standing. She glared at the floor, not at him. "What if they follow you back?" "They won't," he said, calm and absolute. "I'll use lower routes. No identifiers, no authority lanes. I've done this before." That last sentence caught her attention. Her eyes flicked up. "Done what before?" "Brought back what was supposed to stay lost," he said. "Not people, cargo, evidence. But the methods are the same." Arya stared for a moment, then nodded, like she didn't want to believe him, but had already decided she would. "How long will you be gone?" 4 hours. 6 at most." "Too long," she said immediately. "Shorter if I don't get slowed down by arguing," he replied, pulling his jacket from the hook. Arya stood, arms wrapped tight across her chest. "And if you don't come back?" "I will." "That's what everyone said." She shot back, voice low and sharp. Cashin paused, met her eyes. "I don't say things I don't mean." Something in her gaze flinched and then steadied. She looked away first. "Fine. Then do it fast." "I will." He slung his pack on, then crossed to the panel by the door. "Listen carefully. I'm blocking the pod's ID beacon. Once I lock it from outside, it won't show as occupied on any system. If someone tries to ping it, they'll see it as offline maintenance. No one will come. Unless they already know," Arya murmured. "Then they'd already be here," Cashin said. "And they're not." That silenced her. He set the beacon blocker and keyed in a manual lock code. The pod lights flickered briefly as the system's signature vanished from the network. He tested it on his datapad. No return ping. "Perfect. I'll knock 3 times, pause, then once," he said. "No other pattern. If it's not that, you don't open." Arya nodded tightly. "If something happens, you stay silent," he cut in. "Lights off, doors sealed, no movement. Not even a whisper." She nodded again, slower this time. Cashin hesitated just for a heartbeat. He hadn't hesitated once since arriving. But he did now, standing with his hand on the lock, looking at Arya, her shoulders stiff, her hair falling forward, her eyes sharp but tired. She was holding herself together, entirely out of force. "Eat," he said finally. "There's root paste left. And drink water. You don't get to collapse while I'm gone." Her mouth twitched, halfway to a bitter smile. That sounded almost like concern. "It's logistics," he said, and keyed the door. The seal released with a soft hiss. Cool mist air pushed in. Cashin stepped out, glanced down both ends of the bridge, clear, and locked the door behind him. The panel light went dark. The pod was invisible now. He moved fast and silent across the glass walkway, boots barely making sound, vanishing into the fog layers before the first market bells started ringing below. Inside the pod, Arya stood motionless for several seconds, staring at the locked door. She exhaled through her nose, turned, and went back to the cradle. Sori was asleep again, tiny hands curled into fists. Arya lowered to the floor, her fingers resting on the mesh beside her daughter, and whispered so softly even the pod sensors wouldn't catch it. Come back. The fog over the lower terraces was dense, clinging to everything like cold breath. Cashin moved through it at a measured pace, his hood drawn low, his boots making no sound on the wet glass walkways. He kept his head still, but his eyes scanning. Windows, scaffold shadows, the arcs of drone paths above. He avoided the authority lanes entirely, cutting through supply tunnels where motion sensors had been left to decay years ago. Every route he chose was one he could disappear from instantly if followed. He reached the mist markets before they fully opened, when only the stall keepers were present, half awake and steaming water for their morning tea. Perfect. No crowds, no questions. He bought with precise speed. Varan root slabs, dried Draxon mushrooms, crushed Furlan seed, child cloth wraps, distilled Orvan water cartridges. Every vendor tried to start a conversation. He gave clipped answers and kept moving. No one remembered quiet men who moved like they had places to be. By the time the markets began filling with people, Cashin was already ascending the freight lifts back toward the upper terraces, his pack heavier and his mind running ahead of him. He would restock the pod, get Arya fed, check Sori's vitals, then access a hidden junction terminal on the mid-level deck to start pulling the erased manifest logs. If he found the courier ID, he could trace who authorized the pickup. Whoever had sealed Sori's cradle had left a trail. He just had to find it before they realized she was still alive. He reached the bridge outside the nursery pod and scanned the walkway behind him twice, slow. Empty. He keyed the lock code and gave the agreed knock. 3, pause 1. The door opened fast. Arya stood there barefoot, her hair a mess, eyes wide and tight. When she saw it was him, her whole body seemed to unlock. She stepped back to let him in, trying to hide the way her knees nearly buckled. You were gone 6 hours, she said, voice sharp from tension. 5.5, Cashin said, slipping past her and locking the door behind him. Beacon stay dark? Yes, she said. No one came. Good. He set the pack on the counter and began unpacking. Arya hovered close, glancing from the door to him to the cradle, like she couldn't stop checking they were all still in place. Sori lay in the cradle blinking at the ceiling, her tiny hands twitching. She looked stronger. She's been awake more, Arya said quickly, almost like a report. 3 feeds, no vomiting. Her skin's warmer. Cashin crouched by the cradle and scanned her with his handheld. Temperature normal. Pulse strong. She's improving, he said, and meant it. Arya let out a slow breath and sank onto the floor mat. She stayed quiet while he stocked the shelves, Varan root slabs in the cold drawer, Furlan seed in sealed jars, new cloth wraps folded on the shelf. When he finished, she finally said, Where did you learn to move like that? Like what? He asked, checking the mist filter output. Like you're always planning for an ambush, she said. Like you know which shadow you'd shoot from if this room was attacked. Cashin straightened and looked at her. Survey training. And habit. You don't unlearn it. You just carry it into quieter places. And this is a quieter place? She asked dryly. It will be, he said. Arya stared at him for a moment, then shifted her legs under her. You didn't just find her by luck, did you? No, he didn't look away. I hunted the data until it gave me something. Why? Because she was alive, Cashin said simply. That was enough. Arya's throat tightened. She looked down quickly, tucking loose hair behind her ear like she could hide the way her hands trembled. Cashin pretended not to notice. He pulled his datapad from his pack and sat at the table. Next step is the erased manifest. I can recover fragments if I access a maintenance junction. Quiet 1, off network. I'll go tonight. Her head snapped up. Again. Yes, he said. At night, there's less risk. You and Sori stay dark like before. Her lips parted as if to argue, then closed. And if they catch you pulling logs? They won't, he said. And if they try, I know how to disappear. Let's stop her cold. She searched his face for any hesitation and found none. After a long moment, she nodded once. Cashin set the datapad aside. Before that, you eat. Then sleep. Arya gave him a look, half defiant, but didn't argue this time. He heated a portion of root and mushrooms while she changed Sori's cloth wrap. The girl kicked faintly and latched onto Arya's finger. Arya smiled without meaning to, and Cashin caught it, quick, fragile, but real. They sat on the floor to eat, back against the cradle rail. Arya was silent at first, then said, when they took her, the world just stopped looking, like she was never real. That's how systems work, Cashin said. They only see what they're told to see. And you? She asked. I stopped listening to systems a long time ago, he said. Arya went quiet again. Sori stirred, eyes heavy, and Arya stroked her hairless head gently until she drifted off. Cashin watched them both, his body still, his mind already mapping terminal access points. He would find who did this. Quietly. Completely. And if anyone came for this pod again, they would not get close. For now, though, he let the room stay still. The warmth, the steady mist, the soft pulse of the cradle lights, all of it holding for one more night. Cashin slipped back into the pod well past midnight, sealing the door silently behind him. His clothes were damp from the fog tunnels, his hair flattened to his forehead. He moved straight to the corner table, dropped his pack without a word, and exhaled slow. Arya was awake. She sat on the floor beside the cradle, her knees drawn up, Sori curled asleep on her chest inside a soft wrap. The faint glow of the cradle lights traced the tired planes of her face. Her eyes flicked up fast at the sound of the door. When she saw it was him, the tension in her body broke in a visible wave. You're late, she whispered, her voice thin from holding itself steady too long. I know, he said, pulling off his soaked jacket. Had to reroute twice. They put sensors back on the freight lifts. Her face went tight. Did they see you? No, Cashin said, flat and certain. He crouched and unzipped his pack, pulling out a datapad wrapped in insulating cloth. But they'll know someone was inside the archives. Not who? Not yet. Arya watched him work, her hand rubbing Sori's back in slow circles. Did you get it? Cashin brought up the cracked manifest log, its text broken and jittering across the screen. He rotated it, stabilizing the fragments. Most of it. Enough. He tapped through pages until the registry ID appeared. A line of numbers, half corrupted, but readable. The courier's tag. Arya's breath caught softly. That's him, she said. Cashin's eyes stayed cold on the screen. Contracted under a false license. Real ID buried under 6 shell accounts. Whoever paid him knew how to erase trails. Can you find who paid him? Yes, Cashin said. But it will take time, and I have to be careful. If I push too hard, they'll see me digging and burn what's left. Arya tightened her arms around Sori. Then go slow. I will. He shut the datapad off and wrapped it again. Silence hung between them for a long moment. The soft hiss of the mist filters the only sound. Cashin finally straightened, crossing to the basin to wash the dirt and coolant residue from his hands. Behind him, Arya said quietly she smiled today. Cashin looked over his shoulder. Arya's eyes were on Sori, her thumb brushing the girl's cheek. Just for a second, she said, voice softer now. Her mouth twitched, like she remembered how. Cashin dried his hands and came closer, crouching again. Sori's tiny chest rose and fell in slow rhythm. Her lips parted slightly in sleep. She looked heavier now. Real. She's gaining strength, Cashin said. She's coming back, Arya whispered, and then added, barely audible, I don't know if I am. Cashin's gaze shifted to her. She didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed on her daughter, but her grip on the wrap had gone white-knuckled. I'm still waiting for it to be taken away again, she said. Every time I blink. You're not alone anymore, Cashin said, calm but firm. Arya's jaw worked. Until you leave. I won't, he said, without hesitation. She finally looked at him then, direct, searching as if trying to find any crack in him that said he didn't mean it. There wasn't one. After a long pause, her shoulders dropped and she nodded once. Then what now? She asked. Now, Cashin said, standing, you sleep. I watch. And tomorrow we build this place so solid they can't touch it. Her mouth twitched faintly. You talk like you're fortifying a bunker. I am, he said. Arya almost smiled at that. Almost. She shifted Sori carefully into the cradle and stood. The exhaustion showed in every small motion, her stiff posture the slight sway when she stepped back. Cashin caught her elbow, steadying her. She didn't pull away. "I can't remember the last time I slept without dreaming of her gone," she murmured. "Then tonight you sleep," he said, "and dream of her here." She stared at him for a long moment, then exhaled and lowered herself onto the floor mat. The thermal shirt slipped off one shoulder again. She didn't fix it. Her eyes stayed open until they caught his, standing by the door, arms folded, still and unblinking like part of the room. That seemed to be enough. Her eyes closed. Her breathing evened. Cashin stood watch until her breaths matched Sori's. He didn't sit, didn't relax, just stood steady in the warm hum of the pod, listening to the small sounds of life returning to this place. For the first time since he'd found the child, the thoughts settled in his mind and stayed. They were safe. For now. And he would make sure for now became forever.